It was not a grand moment. That is the first thing worth saying about it. The falling did not happen during a significant conversation where both people were fully present to the weight of what was being exchanged. It did not arrive in a moment of obvious emotional depth or vulnerability, or the specific intensity of two people deliberately opening toward each other. It happened in an ordinary moment, a moment that neither person was particularly marking as significant, a moment that, from the outside, would have appeared entirely unremarkable. And that is precisely why it reached the avoidant in the way it did. The avoidance defense is calibrated for significance, has learned over years of navigating intimate connection to identify and manage the moments that carry obvious emotional weight, the direct expression of feeling, the deliberate vulnerability, the specific front facing quality of someone who is consciously opening toward the avoidant with the clear intention of genuine contact. Those moments the defense handles, has protocols for, can intercept and redirect, and manage back to something the interior can accommodate without the full threatening exposure of genuine reciprocal feeling being required. The ordinary moment has no protocol. Because the ordinary moment was not announcing itself as the thing to manage, was simply happening. The unremarkable, unself-conscious, nobody particularly noting it quality of a person being fully themselves in the middle of their own genuine life, not performing anything, not directing anything toward the avoidant, simply present in the ordinary way, doing the ordinary thing. And in that ordinariness, something reached past every defense the avoidant had. What was the ordinary thing? Not a specific action that can be listed as the variable responsible for the outcome. Human beings are too particular for that kind of reduction. But there are honest things that can be said about the quality of the ordinary moment that tends to produce this. It was a moment of genuine self-forgetfulness. The person was not thinking about the avoidance response, was not calibrating their behavior to the impression it might create, was not in any of the self-conscious modes that most people inhabit when they are aware of being observed by someone who matters to them. They were simply doing the thing, absorbed in it, present to it, giving it the full quality of their attention without the portion of awareness that most people maintain as the background monitor of how they are being perceived. The self-forgetfulness is rare. Most people, in the presence of someone they care about or want to impress or are navigating a dynamic with, maintain some level of self-monitoring, some background awareness of the impression being created, some adjustment of behavior to the perceived conditions of being observed. The person who fell out of self-monitoring entirely, who became genuinely absorbed in something to the point where the self-consciousness simply was not running, produced something in the avoidant that the self-conscious version of themselves could not have produced. The avoidant saw someone who was completely real, not performing realness, not demonstrating authenticity as a quality, simply being real in the specific, unself-conscious, nobody is watching quality of someone who had genuinely forgotten, in the absorption of the moment, that they were being watched. The avoidant's interior response to that specific quality was involuntary. That is the most accurate word for it. Not chosen, not anticipated, not the result of any deliberate process of assessment and conclusion. Simply arrived. The falling was not a decision, was not even an experience the avoidant was fully conscious of in the moment of its happening, was the specific, precognitive, arriving before awareness caught up quality of something that established itself in the interior before the management could identify it as the thing to prevent. By the time the avoidance system registered what had occurred, by the time the defense mobilized in response to the recognition that genuine attachment had begun establishing itself, it was already there, already in the interior, already the thing that the subsequent management would attempt, with characteristic insufficient success, to reduce to something smaller than what it actually was. There is something specific about the self-forgetfulness that deserves genuine examination, because it is not simply the absence of self-consciousness. It is the presence of something that the self-consciousness, when it is running, tends to obscure. Genuine interest in the world. The person who fell into genuine self forgetfulness did so because something outside themselves genuinely claimed their attention fully. A problem they were working on, a conversation with someone they found genuinely interesting, a creative engagement that absorbed the full quality of their attention, a moment of genuine connection with something, an idea, a piece of work, another person, the specific texture of an experience that was intrinsically compelling enough to make the self monitoring unnecessary because there was simply nothing left of the available attention for it. That genuine interest in the world, the specific quality of someone who is genuinely engaged with things outside themselves, who finds genuine value and genuine fascination in the actual content of their actual experience, is one of the rarest available qualities in a person. And it is one of the most deeply compelling things the avoidant's defended interior can encounter. Because the avoidant's own interior, organized around the management of genuine exposure, tends to be significantly self-referential. The management requires attention, the monitoring of the interior for the signs of vulnerability that need addressing, the ongoing calibration of engagement and distance. All of that work is inward directed, is about the self's own conditions rather than about genuine engagement with the world outside the self. The person who is genuinely engaged with the world, who brings their full attention to things outside themselves, without the portion that is perpetually monitoring for interior threats, represents something the avoidance managed interior does not produce: a quality of genuine aliveness in the engagement with actual experience that the defended life's self-referentiality prevents. The avoidant sees it and recognizes it as the thing they have been preventing themselves from having. This is where the falling goes deepest, where it exceeds the ordinary attraction to someone interesting or warm or genuinely self-possessed, and becomes the madly that was described in the previous script. The person's genuine engagement with the world reflects back to the avoidant the specific quality of experience that the defended life was costing them, not in a confrontational way, not as an accusation or a comparison, simply through the contrast of being present to someone who is genuinely living their life, fully engaged, genuinely curious, authentically absorbed, and feeling, in the presence of that quality, the specific texture of what the defended self-referential management of the interior does not produce: the aliveness, the genuine, full, not requiring management aliveness of someone who is actually in contact with their own experience and with the world, rather than perpetually managing the conditions of that contact from behind his architecture. The avoidant falls in love with the aliveness, with the specific, involuntary, arrived before the defense could prevent it recognition that this person is genuinely, fully alive in a way that the defended life has been preventing the avoidant from being. What follows the falling is the same territory that has been examined throughout this conversation: the management asserting itself, the defense mobilizing belatedly to manage what has already established itself in the interior. The distance that looks like cooling, but is the specific, activated, this matters enormously retreat of someone who has been genuinely touched and found it intolerable in its genuineness. None of that is new. What is worth adding here is the specific quality of what the ordinary moment of self-forgetfulness produces that makes it different in character from the deliberate displays of authentic quality that the person might have offered. The deliberate displays, the direct expressions of depth, the conscious demonstrations of self-possession, the careful communications of genuine values and genuine character, those are real. Those are also somewhat manageable by the defense, because they have the quality of being directed, of being, however genuinely, offered toward the avoidant as part of the dynamic's engagement. The ordinary moment of self-forgetfulness was not directed, was not offered, was simply present. The unintended, unrehearsed, nobody was trying to produce this quality of a person being completely themselves, without the relational context of the dynamic providing any organizing framework for how that being was showing up. The unintended quality is what the defense has no protocol for. The defense manages what is aimed at it, cannot manage what is simply present. And the person who is simply present, fully, genuinely, without intending any particular effect, in the ordinary moment of their ordinary self forgetfulness, produced in the avoidance interior the thing that all the deliberate, authentic displays could not produce. The genuine, unmanageable, already established before the defense arrived, falling into love, unexpected, real, with someone who was not trying to make it happen, who was simply, in the unremarkable, ordinary moment, completely themselves. That is the thing. That has always been the thing. The complete, genuine, self forgetful, world engaged, unperformed quality of someone who is simply living their actual life in the ordinary moments that turn out to be the ones that matter most, not the significant ones, the ordinary ones, where the real person shows up, without announcement, without management, simply there, completely. And that completeness is what the avoidance defended interior, for all its sophisticated architecture, simply could not prevent itself from recognizing and falling toward, without planning to. The ordinary moment of self-forgetfulness does not end when the moment ends. That is the specific quality of genuine impression that distinguishes it from the ordinary social interactions that leave no particular trace in the avoidance interior. Most interactions leave traces that fade. The pleasant conversation that is remembered warmly for a day and then settles into the background of ordinary social memory. The engaging exchange that produced genuine interest in the moment and genuine diminishment of that interest over subsequent days as the ordinary conditions reasserted themselves. The specific, characteristic, this is how the avoidant processes connection pattern of feeling something and then managing the feeling back to something more comfortable through the reliable mechanism of distance and time. The ordinary moment of genuine self-forgetfulness leaves a different kind of trace, not the fading kind, the kind that keeps returning, that is present in the gaps between deliberate activity, with the specific, directional, this particular moment quality of something that has not been adequately processed through the usual channels. The avoidant keeps returning to it, not always consciously, not always as the deliberate replaying of a memory that is being savored, more often as the involuntary surfacing of something that the interior has not found adequate resolution for, the moment arriving without being summoned, the specific quality of it, the person absorbed in their own genuine engagement, completely present to something that was not the avoidant, completely real in the specific way of someone who had genuinely forgotten to monitor their own presentation, arriving with a freshness that the management's subsequent work has not been able to adequately dull. The freshness is significant. Genuine impressions tend to maintain their freshness in a way that managed impressions do not. Managed impressions, the carefully curated presentations of self that most social interaction involves, can be assessed and processed and filed away because they have a quality of completion to them. They were offered as a complete thing, received as a complete thing. The processing is relatively straightforward. The genuine moment of self-forgetfulness was not offered as a complete thing, was not curated or managed or presented toward any particular end, was simply present. And its uncurated, unmanaged, simply present quality means it cannot be processed in the usual way, cannot be received as a complete, accessible, file-awayable unit of social interaction. It keeps having more in it. Each returning to the memory produces something slightly different, a new aspect of the specific quality that the moment contained, a new recognition of something in it that the previous returning had not fully brought forward, a new dimension of what the person's complete, self-forgetful presence in that moment was actually expressing. This is the specific, characteristic quality of genuine impression maintaining itself in the avoidance interior against the management's best efforts to reduce it. The management wants to process it, to assess it, categorize it, place it in the appropriate mental file of, this was a nice moment with this person, and here is its appropriate significance. But the genuine impression resists the filing because it keeps having more in it than the filing system can accommodate. What it keeps having more of is this: the specific, accumulated, gradually more available recognition of what the person's self forgetful presence was expressing about who they actually are. Not as a claimed quality, not as a demonstrated value, as the lived reality of someone whose interior life is genuine enough and full enough and sufficiently its own that it can be completely occupied by something outside itself, without the self-monitoring that most people maintain as the background condition of being present in the world. The avoidant keeps returning to the moment and keeps finding in it new evidence of the person's genuine interiority, of the specific, real, not performed quality of someone who has an actual interior life that is their own, who has interests and engagements and genuine curiosity that exists independently of the relational context, who can be fully absorbed in the actual content of their actual experience, without the portion of awareness that is perpetually monitoring the impression being created. Each return to the moment deepens the avoidant's recognition of that quality, makes it more precisely known, produces the specific, accumulating, increasingly detailed knowledge of someone that only genuine impression, rather than the processing of curated presentation, tends to produce. The avoidant is, through the returning to the ordinary moment, coming to know the person in a way that the social interaction of the dynamic has not fully produced, is encountering in the memory of the moment dimensions of the person's genuine character that the moment's genuine quality made available in ways that the deliberate expressions of character could not. This accumulating knowledge has a specific effect on the avoidant's interior. It deepens the feeling, not in the acute, this is activating way of the initial falling, in the quieter, more fundamental, more durable way of genuine knowing producing genuine attachment. The initial falling was the response to the immediate quality of the genuine moment, was the specific, involuntary, defense-bypassing recognition of something real. That recognition was genuine, but it was also incomplete. It was the recognition of a quality before the full knowledge of what that quality expressed had been developed. The deepening that comes from returning to the moment and finding more in it each time is the fuller knowing producing the fuller attachment. The avoidant is not simply responding to the initial impression anymore, is responding to the increasingly complete picture of who the person is that the continuing engagement with the genuine moment is producing. This is different from ordinary attraction deepening through continued social engagement. Ordinary attraction deepens through accumulated interaction, through more conversations, more shared time, more direct exchanges that build the knowledge of the other person incrementally through the normal channels of social relating. The avoidance deepening attachment to the ordinary moment deepens through the interior engagement with a single genuine impression, through the specific, not requiring additional interaction, quality of genuine impression continuing to have more in it. Through the interior alone, through the returning to the memory, the finding of new recognition, the accumulation of genuine knowing without the new interactions that ordinary deepening would require. This means the attachment can deepen significantly in the avoidant's interior, even in the conditions of the distance the avoidant is simultaneously maintaining. Even while the behavior is organized around the management of the feeling rather than the expression of it. The interior and the behavior are running in entirely different directions. The interior is deepening. The behavior is managing. The gap between them is widening. The widening gap is the specific, uncomfortable, this is not sustainable indefinitely condition that the avoidant is living in as the attachment deepens through the continuing interior engagement with the genuine impression. Not sustainable indefinitely because the interior and the behavior cannot continue to diverge without cost. The cost accumulates in the same way that any internal contradiction accumulates, in the chronic, low-level, not obviously attributable to a single source drain of a system that is running two contradictory processes simultaneously. The interior process is deepening genuine attachment. The behavioral process is managing and maintaining distance. Both are genuine, both are running, and the energy required to maintain both simultaneously, to deepen genuine attachment in the interior, while simultaneously managing the behavioral expression of that attachment back to something that does not require the exposure that genuine expression would demand, is considerable. The cost shows up not as crisis, but as the specific texture of the avoidance daily experience becoming slightly more difficult than usual, slightly more effortful, slightly less adequately addressed by the usual management tools. The defended life continuing to function, but requiring more maintenance than it typically requires. The self-sufficiency that was always adequate, now feeling slightly less so. The person, meanwhile, does not know any of this is happening, has no direct access to the avoidance interior deepening, has only the behavioral evidence available, which continues to be the managed, distanced, insufficient expression version of what the interior is actually containing, which does not reflect the deepening, which is in fact organized around the prevention of the deepening becoming visible. This asymmetry, the avoidance interior deepening while the behavioral expression remains insufficient, is one of the most specifically painful qualities of this dynamic for the person who is living on the receiving end of the behavior, rather than in proximity to the interior. Because the behavior communicates something. Even when it is not explicitly communicating, even when the avoidant is not making any particular statement about the connection, the behavior communicates. The distance communicates. The managed warmth communicates. The insufficient showing up communicates. And what it communicates bears no relationship to what the interior is actually containing. The person reads the behavior and arrives at conclusions about the avoidance feeling that are simply inaccurate. Not because the person is a poor reader of relational dynamics, because the behavior is a poor reflection of the interior. Because the gap between the deepening genuine attachment and the managed behavioral expression is large enough that the most honest, accurate reading of the behavior does not produce an accurate picture of what the feeling actually is. The person deserves to know this, not to create obligation, not to require remaining available to the insufficient behavioral expression because the interior is genuine, but as the honest information that allows the accurate picture, that prevents the specific, damaging conclusion that the insufficient behavior tends to produce in the person receiving it. The conclusion that the feeling was not real, or was not deep, or was not sufficient to overcome the management's preferred conditions. The feeling was real, was deepening, was being fed by the continuing interior engagement with the genuine impression of the ordinary moment, was producing, in the avoidance interior, something more substantial and more durable than the behavior gave any indication of. And simultaneously, the behavioral expression of that feeling was insufficient, was managed, was organized around the prevention of genuine exposure rather than the expression of genuine attachment, was costing the person on the receiving end of it the specific damage of loving genuinely and being met in the behavior with something that communicated far less than the interior was actually containing. Both true, both real, neither canceling the other. The ordinary moment of self-forgetfulness produced something real in the avoidant, something that the defense did not prevent and has not been able to adequately reduce, something that keeps returning, keeps deepening, keeps being present in the interior with the specific freshness of genuine impression that genuine impression tends to maintain. The person did not produce it intentionally, was simply present in the ordinary way of someone who was genuinely absorbed in something real, was not performing the quality that produced the falling, was simply being what they are in the unremarkable texture of an ordinary moment. That is both the most honest thing about what happened and the most important thing to understand about what it means. The falling happened in response to who the person genuinely is, not to a presentation of who they are, not to the deliberate expression of their qualities, to the genuine, unintended, self-forgetful reality of someone who is simply, completely, without performance or management, themselves. That self continues to exist, is not a historical thing that existed only in the moment the avoidant fell toward, continues to be what it is in the ordinary days of the person's ongoing genuine life, continues to have the specific, real, unperformed quality that the ordinary moment revealed, the genuine interiority, the honest engagement with the world, the self forgetfulness that is not the absence of self, but the presence of genuine engagement with something beyond the self. The avoidant knows this person. Not fully. The distance has prevented the full knowledge that sustained, genuine mutual presence produces. But genuinely, in the specific, deepened through the interior engagement with the genuine impression way of someone who has been encountering who the person actually is, in the one place the defense could not prevent the encountering, in the interior, in the returning to the ordinary moment, in the finding of more in it each time. The avoidant knows. And the knowing keeps deepening, and the behavior keeps failing to reflect the depth of the knowing. And the gap between those two things is the entire territory of the avoidant's unfinished work. Work that only they can do, in their own interior, on their own timeline, through their own genuine choosing, while the person lives their life in the ordinary days that produced the falling in the first place, and that continue simply by being genuinely lived to be the thing worth falling toward.